Hello.
Howdy.
So we're coming at this from the perspective of essentially having conduct either inspections or having had growers or producers ask us to come in and take a look at their facility. Additionally, us begging growers and producers to let us come in and look at their facility because this is a new industry. There are employee exposures that we haven't really looked at before. There are hazards to this industry that, frankly, because people were growing in a garage or a warehouse on their own time, underground, we didn't know. Well, I didn't know anything about growing a plant. I can't grow anything. I kill mint, you know. So here I am learning about how the marijuana plant is grown on the state computers, Googling how to grow marijuana, how to process marijuana, because we just don't know. This has been an interesting process for the two of us, because our job is to keep employees healthy and safe in the workplace, and it doesn't matter what the workplace is. My opinions on what the workplace is, they don't matter. My job is to keep everyone healthy and safe, and that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to approach every inspection just about the same way. Some are more entertaining. You know, these facilities are great. People are generally very interesting. They have really good stories to tell, so I like that.
But we can't really tell them stories until everything's fine on the report. One of the main things from the safety aspect that I've noticed is a lot of these companies are just going out and renting whatever warehouses they can get, just so they can get plants in the ground, get processes going.
Oh.
And
I was just going to turn down
Keep
the
going.
lights.
Okay, cool, thanks.
But they're just jumping into any warehouse that they can get. There's wiring nightmares. They're using a lot of extension cords for permanent wiring, fans going everywhere, and just everything. Circuits overloaded, and they're trying to make it happen on a shoestring to get their foot in the door. And that's where a lot of our safety and health too. Let's hurry up and get this product going and think about employee safety later.
Thankfully, there is a lot of money in a lot of these growers, some of that out-of-state money that a lot of these growers are meeting together and they're saying, or producers, they're saying, how do we get this set up and set up right? They don't want issues with the OLCC coming to do inspections. They want to just fly through and be able to make their product and get it to the stores as quickly as they can. So I learned so much, you know, from seed to shining shatter, right? There's so much that happens in the process, the growth and the processing of marijuana. People breed plants. They think about it. Which plants are we going to, you know, hybridize here? How are we going to make these specialty plants? Then they grow the plants. Then they harvest them, then they process them, they do some more processing, and then someone consumes them. Lots of different divisions apply. This is really confusing. If you have a warehouse that you're growing marijuana in, and the building next door, you're processing it, you're in Division 4 for agriculture, and Division 2 for processing. And now, which rules do your employees fall under if they work in both places? What kind of safety committees do you have to have? What kind of training do you have to have? You know, there's a lot of complexity there. And then employers don't think about this. When you start to do construction in your facility, if you're managing the people coming in to do that construction, you're under Division 3, you're the general contractor, and you're responsible for their health, the contractor's health and safety on your facility as well. It can get really, really messy. And like Joey was saying, you know, I come in, I start to grow in this room. Very quickly, I realize I need more space. So I take that next room and I retrofit it to work for my growing. And then I take the room across the way and I try to turn that into a curing room where I'm adding heat because I want to get that product dried out to just the right stage, you know. And then I go to the next room and now I'm processing with butane. And this is just because that's how my business grew. There isn't a lot of thought process into, they're not running production facilities and they haven't before. They don't think about how do I organize my workflow. They're not thinking about 5S'ing anything. They're not thinking about BPP. They're not thinking about anything other than I need that next room ready to go to take my product to the next level. Getting people to take a step back, think about a thoughtful flow of product, and thinking about ventilation requirements, separating flammables from combustibles, you know, it's just not in their nature. And frankly, they've been making hash oil in their garage for 30 years, and they've never blown up, so who the hell am I to tell them what to do? And it's pretty standard for anybody that runs a business that's run it for a long time, and farmers in general. Who the hell am I to tell them what to do? It's they're a hard sell for sure. All right, we kind of went over this already, types of workplaces. So some of the hazards we see, pesticides, you know, solvent storage, the ergonomic hazard of trimming the product. Here, I mean, people have contact dermatitis from trimming. They'll sit there for long hours, hunched over, trimming the product, or they're working on ladders to trim the product. Compressed gas storage.
Yeah, ladders are a big thing. I mean, especially during the harvest, because they're hanging in warehouses. They're using 8, 10, 12-foot step ladders to get up high so they can have these 10-foot plants hanging down to dry. And they're up and down ladders all day long, and talking to them about inspect your ladder daily before you use it. No, this wooden rickety thing is going to do a great job for me. So, and just like she said, they've been doing this in their garage for 20, 30 years, and just to get them into that mindset, there are hazards that have to be regulated.
Yeah, I look at it like the craft brewing industry. You had a lot of people that could make beer in their garage. They made amazing small batch ciders and beers. They don't know how to work in a bottling line. They don't know how to work in a production facility. They simply don't have that mindset, and they've never worked in a place like that, much less run a business like that. And we had hurdles with the craft brewing industry in health and safety, and we're going to have hurdles with this industry as well. Solvent and feed. So the solvent aspect comes into play in a couple of different ways. They clean tools with solvents, usually trim tools and things like that, but they're also going to use the solvents to process the marijuana or the cannabis, depending on what they're growing. And then they're going to feed, and they mix their feed. So this is actually a feed station, and they've got, you can see the electrical up there. They've got hoses coming from a variety of different containers, and they're mixing their feed in there. And then they dispense that into another container, and then they run around and feed the plants. Now, if you're feeding a plant that's 10 feet tall, do you have eye exposure to that feed? When you're spraying with a wand up here, walking around a room, you're getting the base of the plants, sure, but people are spraying everywhere to feed plants. They're not just feeding at the base. And so the thoughtful approach to the work. Do I need to spray up here? You know, can I spray down here?
So when you say feed, are you talking fertilizers?
Yeah. Different amendments to the soil, fertilizers. They feed a lot of nitrogen, various stages. And they'll do that a lot of times just in liquid form. Sometimes they will like sulfur gas a room as well. All right, compressed gases. Oh yeah, what's up?
Are they mixing their own fertilizer?
I have not come across a grower yet that isn't necessarily mixing their own fertilizer. They're procuring different products and then mixing them to a certain extent, but not the guy that's also got his chicken shit, his variety of fertilizers. I'm really good in the field, not so good in rooms like this. I don't see the guy that's got, I see people make compost tea and use that, but I haven't really seen a lot of, this is my special recipe, I've been using this for, I know that exists, but I'm not seeing that yet.
Yeah, because they fall under EPA if they did.
Yep. And right now, with the way that ODA regulates, ODA is looking at that stuff anyways. They are inspecting them, and they have authority under EPA to do all work protection standard and agriculture-related inspections. So, and they are a very good team of people at the ODA. We've been working with them for the past couple years now, and it's really nice to see actually all the state agencies come together and really try to find a way to make this work and make it work well.
Are there regulations on the fertilizer, like how much you can use?
Pesticides, how it's stored, how it's used, feed as well, yep.
And how you dispose of it?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And marijuana is just another crop. It's all crops are regulated.
Yeah.
They have to have a permit?
Depends on the size of the farm and what they're growing. And what they're producing is waste. And one of the interesting things about the cannabis farms is going to be their waste. It has been their waste because it's all tracked from seed to sale. And that waste that they produce throughout the process also has to be tracked and disposed of properly. And once that waste becomes contaminated with butane, what do you do with it? Do you let it off gas somewhere? Go ahead. You have a question?
Well, yeah, at what point in time then, speaking of GHS, Global Harmonization Systems, at what point in time, if I purchase this, do I need to have an SDS with it?
So if you, for PAPE, are purchasing extracts, the extract manufacturer should be developing an SDS, and they are required to. And I've seen 10 to 15.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a chemical.
Yeah.
When it's an extract and it could have potential butane residuals, they have to manufacture it. If it's a tincture and it has alcohol in it, an SDS is required. But again, only if you as the manager of PAPE or I as the compliance officer for Oregon OSHA am going in to purchase it for my business. As a personal consumer, I can ask for it. They can maybe fab something up, find one online and hand it to me, but they don't have any requirement at that point. So it is kind of a nice place for them to operate. Because until you start selling until I start producing an extract that I sell to you to turn into a gummy bear, I don't have to make that SDS. The second I sell it to you and Pape Industries starts making marijuana gummy bears with that, then I have to produce this SDS. Oh, I didn't really talk about compressed gases, did I? So you guys know the hazards of compressed gases. You're all health and safety professionals. They're using this to feed plants. They'll CO2 bomb a room. They'll sulfur bomb a room for pesticide applications, and to do extracts in a variety of different ways. This is a CO2 extract unit, actually, from a facility that we inspected. And they were kind enough to kind of let us come in and take a look at a lot of other things outside of scope of our inspection. So that was really nice, because this unit was not in scope of our inspection. This is what used to happen very, very regularly. I think it probably still happens pretty commonly. It's just dry ice bombing a room, a greenhouse grow. They just got dry ice in those, they're suspended, and they'll just slowly feed carbon dioxide to the plants. So we don't want to see folks going into that room, obviously, for quite a while, but how are you testing the atmosphere? How do you know when you're not at a PEL or when the air is clear? I mean, you're lucky that you have color in the sense of white come off of this. But if it's a compressed gas that you're putting in the air, how do you know? If you're running this unit and you have a leak, how do you know? And so OLCC regulates, and they say if you're going to use CO2 to make an extract, you have to have a monitor in the room. But it's only for CO2. Butane and the others, there aren't any requirements yet. And this is a part of us networking, getting with everybody and figuring it all out, right? Telling OLCC, hey, these are the things we want to see before you license someone. And OLCC telling us these are the things we want to see in order to make a referral. Yeah.
So they don't have, in a OLCC process for using butane, they don't have any alarm system for butane?
Not that I'm aware of. The regulation in OLCC, as far as I'm aware of, that talks about the CO2 systems clearly states that a CO2 system must be in a separate room. And it doesn't really say the same thing for a butane system. So this has got to be in a room that's separate from human occupancy, regular human occupancy. You can go in there to do stuff, but you shouldn't be working in there day in, day out. And I've been doing some research for an inspection, and what I've been able to figure out is there's this sort of gray area with butane. They don't have that regulation set up. It can be in this space. And that's concerning to us. We're in a facility right now that's an extreme concern. And one of the projects I'm working on is trying to network with OLCC. Well, we're already working on it, but really iron down how we're going to deal with that. Because if they can catch it at the licensing stage and not license anyone that isn't properly set up, then no one's going to, hopefully that cuts out that first explosion that changes the industry, you know?
And we want to network and co-op with the fire marshal, with OLCC, with ODA, and try to get it to work out to where we get an OSHA consultation at the same time that OLCC goes in there, at the same time the fire marshal goes in there. So when they give them the go-ahead, you're not going through 4 different phases before you're cleared, but you're going ahead and doing the process because OLCC said it's okay. So let's start making the product before anything else is checked out. Are the outlets spark proof? Are the pumps explosion proof? That gets checked out later after they already start doing the process. So we'd like to have everybody come together, go into an establishment, but sometimes that's hard to do with multiple agencies. And
it's slow going, but I will achieve this goal. It will happen. Compressed gas storage, you know, we see people that either don't secure their containers at all or secure them up by the neck. They're just really not thinking about it. And again, half of these people never used volumes or quantities this size. They're used to making small batches. They're not used to making large batches of things. They just think we upsize, get the next bigger container, and nothing changes, with no thought to really how chemical reactions change as you increase volume, how they can become more and more volatile, or less and less effective. You know, they aren't really thinking about those things yet. I include this, you guys don't even need to see this, but this is, we've done training for the industry as well, so I like to talk to them about just what the PELs are. You know, carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide are going to be the big hitters in a lot of cases, and that PEL on carbon dioxide is so high, unless they're gas in that small room, it's unlikely that they're going to really have an overexposure, or they have a leak in the system. Light is kind of my biggest pet peeve right now. No one wants to think about working under lights as being a PPE issue or a hazard issue really in this industry. They want to think, well, just get some glasses if you can see, or get protection from pokies. You know, the way that grows used to operate, there were so many different things, wires and sticks sticking up everywhere to hold the plants up. Now that people can go and buy legitimate products and have it grow outdoors behind a fence, they're not as worried about training plants in certain ways to keep things discreet or to get the lighting in there just right, you know? So we're seeing less eye pokey hazards, but still more chemical hazards and the lights themselves. If you're working under lights that are emitting the standard sort of growth vegetative state light, you can have severe eye damage after a while, and you can get sunburns on your skin. So I don't think I need to talk about this. You guys can read that, right? Questions? Am I going too fast or too slow? Because I can speed this up so hard.
That food smell is really good. Can you hear this?
Yeah, right? What's
When
up?
stuff is back a notch, these it appears that they're growing in very defined spaces with atmospheres that may not be conducive to human life. How are you guys looking at defining some of this stuff? Because like in our industry, that's a confined space. It's not habitable continuously. You know, accessibility is probably limited to one in, out, this kind of great stuff. And you have a atmosphere that is bad.
Yeah. So in the case of the way OLCC is regulating those CO2 extractions, they've kind of dealt with it already. They do have to have an entry and an exit. They have to have a monitoring system, and they can't access the area without making sure that the monitor is good. And the question's then going to be, at what point do they forget to calibrate, change sensors? You know, that maintenance and upkeep. People I've spoken to, for the most part, if they're investing the money in the system, they're not going to let it fall because they know what that means. Who's to say, though, that 5 years down the line they're not going to go, well, who cares?
So are they required to do like a daily calibration sequence, use specific gases to meet the ranges, that kind of stuff?
Most of those units are good for a year, actually, because they're CO2 only and they're designed and processed. They don't have a requirement to calibrate beyond that every year from the systems I've seen in the manufacturer's books that I've looked through. That being said, you know, if you're introducing something like that to the work atmosphere, my suggestion is always you get our consultants out and have us do some air monitoring. And really, at some point, you need to invest in a four-way and do it right. Or, you know, a CO2 monitor that you can put on an employee if you have someone going in there regularly to sort of figure out. Because you know at this point, and this is the clincher for the employer, through the OLCC licensing process, you learned about the hazards. You were informed of the need to make sure that that atmosphere is habitable. So then, where do you drop the ball on finding out what that actual exposure is as the employer? Do you then go get sampling for the folks that go in and out of there regularly? Or do you just say, well, this one monitor is going to be enough? And then I show up and I go, yeah, but you know, and it's not that hard. SAFE will come out and do it for you free. We'll come out and do it for you free. You have a responsibility, you identified the hazard, to kind of get that sampling and that monitoring done. And I'm likely to go ahead and do as much as I can every time I'm out in the field so that we start to develop data, because we don't have any data. Right? We can look at old welding data and say, if you're welding, I kind of have an idea of what your exposures might be. I can look at data from sandblasting and kind of have an idea. We just don't have any of this. Back to lighting real quick. If they're in the seedling stage, they're looking at 16 to 18 hours of light. That's a lot of light, and they're not going to want to, you know, if I show up and I want to go into inspect a room and it's nighttime, they're not going to open that room for me, because that will screw their plants up. You tell the plants when they think it's night that it's daytime, that messes everything up. And that might be another reason why they're allowed to have 12 plants, just for the sheer viability of a plant, you know, dying or whatever.
If you shot up a plant like that, you could make it a hermaphrodite, so it could go to seed. So a lot of different things.
I'm saving that line. I'm even dropping that at the bar later on. So then in vegetative growth, you're looking at 16 to 20 hours of light, and it's emitting predominantly blue light. And the metal halide lights that they use to do this, they're high pressure sodium metal halide lights. They have an explosion hazard. They have this sort of two-part protection, a two bulb situation. If the outer bulb cracks, they're no longer getting any UV protection, so they're putting out full spectrum light at that point from wherever those cracks are. And those are really, really dangerous to the employees. And then also, once that outer bulb cracks, the potential for explosion is greater. And those bulbs will just explode. That outer bulb is supposed to protect you from when the explosion happens, but if it's cracked, then you're hosed. So inspecting those. Lighting is pricey telling people you've got to take a look at your bulbs once a week to make sure that no damages come. When you're feeding, when you're moving sticks around, you can come into contact and damage those bulbs. So being, again, thoughtful and thinking about how people do tasks, and then also making sure they do inspections is really important. I tell people, don't look into the lights. You want to look like underneath to look at the plant and kind of see what's going on? Don't do it. Keep your head above the lights if you can, as long as the plants are low enough. I find myself when I go into a grow going, oh wow, look at that thing over there, you know. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. You don't need all that on lighting. This is probably the most helpful thing. And we have a whole bunch of safety glasses up here for you to take a look at. Figuring out what safety glasses you want to wear to protect you from what type of light. Usually when we give this is the thing everybody wants for my presentation, this one page. All the rest of it's crap, but this is helpful. But also then, once you've got people wearing them, checking in with them and seeing, because some of the best protection you can get is from the yellow lights, where you can still, it's blocking out certain types of light, but you can still see very well. You can still see the plants, and that's sort of the biggest issue. When you're indoors and you're blocking out light, but I want to see if there's a mite on my plant, I just can't see. So the yellow amber lenses are the best, but they also let in a lot of actual light, not colored light, but actual light, which can be damaging to the eye. So people get eye fatigue quickly wearing them, even though they're sort of the best for the task. This is a picture you can see. These are pesticide strips hanging, and then the lights. This is actually a pretty clean shop. I want to show some nice pictures, not just all bad pictures. But you can see how they're growing the plants. They've got like a mesh. They've got the plants growing underneath it. Maybe you can see. You kind of can't see over here. But they're essentially growing up through that metal mesh, whatever you call that stuff.
Hog wire.
There you go. That's why we do this together. And training the plants to grow in a certain way so they can harvest them easily.
See, you can do the technical work.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I'll drop the shits and the stuffs, and he'll drop everything else. Take it away.
Again, people working on ladders, we really don't like seeing that. Straddling the ladders, definitely not. And most of these people are on these ladders for long periods of time. Like that guy's going to be trimming on that plant and doing whatever. Looks like he's on Facebook right there. But the more time they spend on him, the number one cause of accidents in the construction industry is ladders. That's what is hurting people, and these people are going to spend hours and hours and hours on it. So inspecting the ladders, making sure they're set up properly, not leaned up against walls, and they're using proper techniques with their ladders is going to be really important. I hope that one picture's on here.
I got rid of all the other ones.
They use aerial lifts, like one person aerial lifts. I mean, that would make that a whole lot easier than just the height of it and faster. You'd
Yeah.
think they would want to invest in something
Yeah,
like
the
that.
cost between an aerial lift and a garage cell ladders.
But if you can produce at a faster rate, I would think it's worth it.
It might be like next generation as people are starting to actually get money to reinvest, right? Because they don't have a lot of places they can sink their money. Hopefully they sink it back into themselves.
Yeah.
And they are going to be people buying equipment with cash, you know, but they're going to own that lift, or they're going to own whatever that is. And, you know, ideally that's going to make them better employers, actually.
And we're hoping to see improvements as it goes along. We're out there in a compliance officer situation, so we can kind of cite them into doing what we want them to, but we don't want to do it that way. We want them to come to us and ask for our consultation and ask for the help in advance, so that we don't have to go out there and see all these electrical nightmares and everything that we're seeing at this point. So.
Yeah, I don't have time for the hazards in my report. You know, like I don't have time for that. So I want it to be in compliance when I show up. Call me ahead of time. I'll tell you everything you need to know. And then I want an in compliance inspection at the end of it.
Our compliance or our consultants down in Southern Oregon are pretty busy doing voluntary stuff
Yeah.
on the local farms.
Yeah, Eugene's been pretty busy too. I know they've been out to several places, and we're encouraging people to reach out to us just because we want to learn more of it too, because we do demonstrations like
It's a new
this.
industry.
It is.
Yeah, there's no Fed OSHA courses on how to inspect cannabis industry. So we're coming up with it on our own and working with Washington and California, hopefully, to kind of come up with how, you know, what is inspector safety? What's safety for us when we go in there? What kind of PPE do we wear? You know, we're kind of just figuring it out as we go along.
Even again with this picture, you see wiring that's kind of going willy-nilly and crossing over wiring, and just encouraging the employers to have an electrician come in and wire it right. You're gonna be doing this for a while. Why are you depending on extension cords with 6 surge protectors plugged into it to run your fan?
Yeah, just the sheer loss in energy when you finally get down to the fan is makes it worth it. So we kind of talked a little bit about growth additives. People just make CO2 in a variety of different ways. They can do it the, real nice hippie way where you use vinegar and a little bit of sugar in a container, and then I make, or they can do it really, high tech with compressed gas cylinders that they're releasing into the space. I'm really happy to see people that use the vinegar, baking soda, or the yeast and sugar, because that's way more benign in from my point of view. But whatever floats their boat is what they're going to do, because they've been doing it for a long time. They make a great product. They love it. They stand by it. They'll tell you all about their medicine and how wonderful it is. And never want to poop on anyone's parade. You never want to tell anyone that their kid's ugly or anything like that. So there is definitely an amount of just letting people really talk about how long they've been doing it, how wonderful their product is, and then saying, and guess what? We make new types of rubber for shoes all the time. Shoes get better constantly. We make better cars constantly. And we make better chemicals, we make better sensors, we make better respirators all the time as well. And so you don't get to ignore that stuff when you got your brand new truck outside that's got GPS and all kind of Bluetooth and all kinds of crazy stuff, and then ignore the fact that we have a new, better way to do this over here. And sometimes people listen to me and sometimes they don't. That's why I'm an enforcement officer. So this talks about processing and extractions. There's just a variety of different ways to do the extraction process, and a variety of different solvents and hazards as you go through that. So if you're making Rick Simpson oil, you're generally going to be using IPA and pressure. If you're making butane hash oil, butane honey oil, you're going to be using butane and pressure and temperature a lot of times. Tinctures are going to be alcohol-based. You're going to let something sit in a gallon of alcohol for a week, a month, 2 months, and have someone agitate it. Now, we had people that were making bar top, like lavender-infused vodka, and using kind of cheap containers. And one of those containers got a crack in it, and it spilled booze down the bar, and it caught on fire. So when people are making tinctures, we're looking at the integrity of the glass containers. We're looking at how much they're storing, how many flammables do they have on this one shelf that's really rickety, where they've got 5-gallon containers of tincture going. We don't want to see that. We want to see people taking a little more care for that. And we're making a lot of different products: patches, suppositories, topical creams, edibles. All kinds of different things are being made. I recently got asked by a friend to go look at some products, and I did not realize they make like a syringe full of essentially a concentrate that's high CBD that's like an anal injection. Who wants to do that? I'm sorry, if I'm gonna start smoking pot, I'm gonna smoke a crap ton of pot. I'm not sticking anything in my butt. I'm not putting no cream on. I'm going for broke,
I'll tell you what, that salve is better than anything.
Huh?
That salve, if you got arthritis, that salve's better than anything else.
Yeah. Well, my dad is going through stage 4. He's got terminal cancer, and he'll call me and tell me the doctor said to try this or the doctor said to try that. And I very much appreciate being able to go into a store and buy stuff for him and take it to him and let him try it out. I will say, on the one hand, I'm not a big fan of certain things, but on the other hand, I very much appreciate that access and exposure. I think it's made a big difference in his life, so I can be thankful for that. All right, hazards of extracting. You've got cryogenic fluids, compressed gases, flammable liquids. Again, the issue of electrical safety, cord management, housekeeping in general is a big issue in these facilities. Heat, and then hazardous material storage.
Which also asks for PPE. You got to make sure they have the proper gloves for handling all this, the extreme hots and colds, and managing their cylinders. And we've seen a lot of cylinders just leaned up or sitting freely, and that's one of the main things. We're trying to get them propane tanks sitting right next to heaters. That's not a good idea. It's running the heater, but why have the heater pointed at the propane tank? In a room full of people doing packaging.
Yeah, that's right. One of the things that's worked really well is that these types of things we do when we have industry come is we bring different gloves, so you can tell the difference between, with pesticides, sometimes a label will say a 12 mil butyl rubber, a 14 mil butyl rubber. What's the difference and how does that person know? So we've tried to do a lot of hands-on stuff for employers to be able to come in, look at the different safety glasses, look at the different types of gloves. So when you're going to the safety supply store, when you're buying your pesticide, you make sure you get the right PPE to go with it. These are some pictures of some gems. That top one is well, someone else tell me what that is.
Distiller.
There's pressure, there's gas, there's some sort of vacuum, a battery terminal charger thing, right? They're making butane hash oil in that vessel at the bottom. On a table
No.
that's on 2 sawhorses.
And is that a Scud missile launcher on the front?
I'm not, yeah. So that is where they pack.
Forget it was when you get ready to run.
But that's the vessel that they're running the marijuana through, actually, that long. They're packing that full of pot, and then they're filling it with butane, and then they're using the pressure to pull the butane out. And that's what makes the extract.
Have you ever seen the aftermath of a pressure cooker explosion?
This is going to be a rank pressure cooker explosion.
Yeah.
This is another picture of that CO2 bombing. And then that bottom picture in the red, that's actually processing. They're taking dry ice and making hash with it. So I have another really good picture of this too, but they can be doing all kinds of things in all kinds of corners of their facility, right? There's some guy who has made his hash like that his whole life. And so even though he works for this new guy, and this new guy tells him this is how we're going to do it, in the corner he's going to have his own little experiment running to show his boss, look, this way's better. Don't you like this product? We have to keep our eyes open and constantly be peeking into all the different corners. People are really proprietary about this. They feel like everything they do is a trade secret. It's not. I can learn how to do this online. It's not a trade secret. I did learn how to do a lot of this stuff online on the state computers. I have a backup job if I need it, except for I have to learn how to make plants actually grow. That's my biggest problem. So here's another picture that's sort of a standard. What do you got there? You know, you've got chemical back here, feed. Got a fan sitting on top of a garbage bin next to a heater, next to some compressed gas.
Unsecured.
All the wiring coming out of that socket up there, the power supply, and that's also feeding a stereo, it looks like. It's permanently affixed to the wall. They're probably listening to really bad music, and that's also a big concern when you go to places like this, right? There's one guy that really wants to listen to like Willie, and there's another guy that really wants to listen to Jay-Z. And they'll turn it up as loud as they can, and then we come in to look at the noise exposure, you know? And I unplug the stereo and say, there's your new policy, cheers. No one gets music now. And can you tell I'm a parent too? No one gets music.
OSHA made it.
Hey, I'll be the bad guy any day, you know, that's fine. I tell people all the time, blame me for stuff. So these are those guys that are making that hash. And that was in that red bucket in the other picture.
I like his respirator.
He's got a sweet respirator. The guy in the red is hella excited. He's explaining the process, you know. He's letting you know.
Sample the process. He's already touched the dry ice. And
He's wigging out a little.
yeah.
We just want to, you know, these are the things that we know are happening, and we want to tamp down on it, make sure people aren't doing stuff like this sort of renegade manufacturing. And the biggest thing that we see for people as well is you got a lot of weed, you got a lot of money, and no place for it to go. The potential for workplace violence. It's dangerous. People, you know, that's why there shouldn't be one person in those facilities ever. They've got a buddy system, and they've got to be moving stuff during the day. And if you're loading a car up to do deliveries, how are you transporting that? How are you sealing it in the vehicle so that no one knows that you're moving a bunch of pot? What is ODA doing, in fact, to move? Because they move samples.
So when you say there's a lot of money but no place for it to go, what do you mean?
So if you can't bank at anyone that's federally insured, there's like 2 credit unions and maybe a co-op that I'm aware of that are not insured, where that money can go. But otherwise,
They just have a lot of cash.
they've got a lot of cash.
People in cash, they're buying things in cash, there's a lot of cash money.
And there's a lot of rat hole in the cash too, that's a hazard too. I don't know where they're putting all their money.
Yep.
Or underground bunker.
You're talking about violence in the workplace? A friend of mine, the property next to him, he lives out in the country, they bought it and they're growing marijuana. And his road is about a mile long to get, paved road to get to his house. He was out mowing it last month, and the guys who are the growers threatened his life because the dust will kill the plants. So they called the sheriff came out, actually talked to him, not to him, but to the growers. So he got violence in the workplace, and they threatened him, so he armed himself. Well, they got an agreement where they will take care of his
Oh, yeah,
grass
they'll
along
mow
the
for
road, as long as he doesn't mow it. So he goes, my lawn looks a lot better than that." They're actually taking, I mean, they got an agreement, but it took the sheriff to come out there to get them to talk.
Yeah. I know when legalization first happened, I remember watching a Eugene cop on TV talk about, you can call me if you think they've got 5 plants, but geez, it's your neighbor. Just go talk to them. What am I going to do? Hey, your neighbor thinks you have 5 plants. Maybe you should talk to your neighbor. People actually just being willing to engage in communication is key, and talking without going to that place is important. But these are people that are used to threatening, unfortunately. They're used to using intimidation to keep their grow private, and that's going to be a big cultural hurdle.
And that's the main thing, coming out of the closet and doing it out in the open now. When I was a kid growing up, we hunted and fished out around Lorraine. We stumbled into marijuana patches all the time. And you don't know the times I was held at knife point or chased out and told that if they see me there again, I'd be killed. And that's when I made the call and said that there's a patch out there. Little town like Lorraine, everybody knows you, so you didn't want to snark on anybody extensively. If they threaten your life, I honestly believe that they should at least get a good talk to and get their plants ripped out of the ground. Now they don't have to do that, but they still have that same mentality. A lot of them do.
Yeah. Transportation, it shouldn't really apply to you guys at all, but this is something that I think is kind of a big deal. Don't smoke a bunch of pot in your car. I think the cops would be unhappy. That would be used in a public place. And that's pretty much it. If you guys want to have questions, I've got cards here. I'm available to answer questions. I'm available to talk about other stuff non-cannabis related. I know it seems like this is my forte, but it's actually not. I'm a health compliance officer, so I deal all things. I work in all the different industries. Happy to provide assistance and answer questions. Just because you call me doesn't mean I show up, especially if you guys are in this area. You're out of my jurisdiction. I definitely won't show up. And the same goes for Joey.
Yep. Call and ask questions anytime.
She's our consultant in Eugene, actually, and she does a lot of the cannabis consultations. It's Leanne. She's cooler than the both of us combined.
Hands down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Dave. All right. Oh, yeah. All right.
For all our students.
Thank you.